The old truck rolled up to the fence line just before 7, back when the frost hadn't fully burned off the hollow yet. Evelyn March didn't wave the driver in. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching the trailer sway as it backed toward the barn. The man behind the wheel barely said 2 words to her the whole time. She didn't need him to. She walked to the first crate herself, knelt in the wet grass, worked the latch loose with fingers already stiff from the cold. They came out one at a time, and not gracefully. 84 Pekin ducks, every one of them well past their prime, feathers thinning at the neck, feet cracked from years of standing on wire mesh floors. A few dragged one wing slightly. The kind of injury that never heals right on a commercial operation because nobody there has time to notice, let alone care. Evelyn had paid $260 for the whole lot, barely $3 a bird. Her neighbor Roy Kessler was already leaning over the split-rail fence before she'd opened the second crate, coffee in one hand, wearing the exact look he got whenever he thought somebody was about to waste money. "Those are cull birds," he said. It wasn't a greeting. Evelyn kept working. Egg productions crashed on those hens. That's why they're this cheap. Whole flocks probably done in a year, maybe less. He took a sip. You're going to feed 84 retired layers through a whole growing season for what exactly? She latched the last crate shut and straightened. One hand pressed her lower back. "We'll see, Roy." He shook his head, the way people do when they've already decided the conversation's over, and walked back toward his own place without another word. 84 worn-out ducks stood blinking in the pale October light of the Willapa Valley, Washington, and not one person watching believed this was going to end well. What none of them knew, what Evelyn hadn't told a single soul on Merrill Creek Road yet, was that she hadn't bought them on a whim. She bought them because she was out of options, and out of options as a way of making people do things that look reckless from the outside, but feel like the only sane choice from the inside. If you've ever made a decision everyone around you thought was foolish, but you knew something they didn't, stay with this one. And if you're new here, drop the name of your town in the comments. I like knowing where the story's landing. Evelyn March had run the produce stand at the county farmers market for going on 19 years, but the land underneath it, 8 acres tucked against a tree line, had belonged to her husband Walt's family since the 1960s. Walt died of a stroke in the tool shed on a Wednesday in March, 3 years back now, and Evelyn had spent every season since trying to keep the place exactly the way he'd have wanted it kept. She grew lettuces, brassicas, strawberries, snap peas, sold most of it at market, but her real bread and butter was a standing account with a little restaurant in town called the Hazel Room, buying her greens every week for going on 5 years. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it was Walt's, and some mornings that distinction was the only thing that got her out of bed. Then, in early spring, something started eating the farm alive. At first she blamed the weather. A cold snap, maybe, or bad drainage in the low beds. But the holes in the cabbage leaves kept spreading, and the strawberry starts kept stalling at exactly the same height, like something invisible was clipping their legs off at the knee. She found the truth one night in April, flashlight in hand, walking the rows after a hard rain. The ground was crawling. Gray field slugs, thousands of them, moving through her beds with the kind of patience that doesn't look dangerous until you tally up what's gone by morning. By the middle of May, she'd lost close to a third of her spring lettuce. The Hazel Room called on a Thursday needing 40 pounds for weekend service. She could barely scrape together 12. She tried everything. Copper tape around the raised beds. Worked for maybe a week before the slugs found a way around it. Beer traps sunk flush with the soil, emptied by hand every single morning. Sometimes for 100 drowned in one night, and still more waiting by the next dusk. Organic iron phosphate bait, which killed on contact, but washed out with the first real rain and left the population right back where it started within days. She tried headlamp patrols after dark, bucket in one hand, for weeks. It cost her sleep and gave her almost nothing back. The county extension office suggested she switch her irrigation to early morning only, letting the soil dry before the slugs came out to feed at night. Good advice. It helped some. It wasn't close to enough. By September, Evelyn was staring down a second ruined season in a row, and she didn't have the money or the years left in her to keep losing like this and still call it farming. That was when she drove out to a small agricultural swap meet 40 minutes north, mostly just to get away from the farm for an afternoon, and found a folding table at the end of a row with a hand-painted sign that read, "Waterfowl for Pest Control. Ask me." The man behind it was named Thaddeus Cole, somewhere in his 80s, sun-worn in the way of someone who'd spent 60 years with dirt under his nails. He wasn't selling anything. He just liked to talk. He told her ducks don't eat slugs because they're trained to. They eat them because it's in them, an old, compulsive kind of hunger that goes back generations. A grown duck could clear dozens in a single pass through a bed, and more importantly, they dig out the egg clusters hiding just under the surface, the ones no human ever finds until it's too late. Then he said the thing that stuck with her the whole drive home. You don't want young birds for this kind of work. Young ones panic. Tear up whatever's in their path. What you want, he said, is old stock, spent layers. The ones the commercial outfits are trying to get rid of for pennies, because nobody wants them anymore. He tapped the table once with 2 fingers. Old birds have stopped being in a hurry. That's exactly what makes them good at this. Evelyn drove home with a phone number written on a folded swap meet flyer sitting on the passenger seat, and no idea yet how many people were about to tell her this was the worst idea she'd ever had. She called the number that same night, sitting at the kitchen table with the flyer smoothed out under the lamp. The woman on the other end ran a commercial lair operation 2 counties over and didn't waste time with pleasantries. 84 birds, all past their peak-laying window, all headed for the coal truck at the end of the month regardless. Evelyn could have the whole flock for next to nothing if she wanted them gone before the truck came. Evelyn said yes before she let herself think too hard about it. She told her son Marcus first, over the phone, because he lived 3 hours away, and she needed to say it out loud to someone who couldn't see her face while she said it. Long pause on the line. Mom, ducks, ducks, for slugs. That's the idea. He didn't argue with her. Exactly. He just asked quietly what she'd do if it didn't work, and she told him the truth, that she didn't know, and that not knowing was better than watching a farm bleed out for a 3rd straight season doing nothing different. She mentioned it next to Don Ashworth, who ran the feed store in town and had known Walt since they were both in grade school. Don set his forearms flat on the counter, the way he did when he was about to say something he figured you needed to hear. 84 cold layers, he said slowly, against a slug infestation. He shook his head. Evelyn, that's not pest control. That's a second problem wearing feathers. She bought the extra feed anyway. She posted a single photo to the county farming Facebook group the morning the birds were due to arrive, mostly just explained why there'd be a truck pulling into her drive at dawn. The comments came faster than she expected, and none of them were kind. Those ducks will do more damage than the slugs ever could. You're about to have a mud pit where a farm used to be. This isn't a plan. It's a slow-motion disaster. Somebody left a single crying laughing emoji, no words at all. It got 9 likes. Nobody was being cruel exactly. They just weren't wrong to be skeptical, and Evelyn knew it. 84 broken-down birds turned loose on a working vegetable farm did not sound like a strategy. It sounded like grief dressed up as a plan, and maybe some of that was true, too. She went ahead anyway. She strung temporary electric poultry netting to break the 8 acres into 4 rotating sections, and wrote the schedule out longhand on a sheet of graph paper pinned to the inside of the barn door. Section 1, Week 1, 84 ducks. No exceptions, no shortcuts. The first thing she noticed wasn't the slugs disappearing. It was the quiet. 3 nights after she turned the flock loose in Section 1. Her worst bed, the one closest to total loss. She walked the rows after dark out of habit, flashlight low against the soil the way she had every night for months. For months, that beam had never once swept across bare ground without movement. That night, walking the same 20 yards she walked all spring. She counted 6. She told herself it didn't mean anything yet. One quiet night wasn't seasoned. By the end of the second week, she stood at the edge of Section 1 with her phone out, comparing photos against shots she'd taken 14 days before. The slime trails that had become as familiar to her as her own handwriting were simply gone. The cabbage leaves that had been laced by June were whole again. Marcus drove up on a Sunday and walked to bed without saying much of anything, just ran his thumb along the edge of an untouched leaf like he was checking it was real. "Mom," he finally said, "there's nothing here to eat." Week 3 brought the hawks. A pair of them found the flock working out in the open, and Evelyn lost 3 birds over 4 days before she understood what was happening. Feathers scattered near the fence line, one morning after another. She spent a weekend and nearly $200 stringing lightweight netting over the most exposed stretch of pasture, and started bringing the older, slower birds in under cover a full hour before dusk instead of waiting for dark. Roy Kessler showed up at the fence without being asked, saw her wrestling a roll of hardware cloth alone, and picked up the other end without a word. They didn't talk much while they worked. They didn't need to. By the first week of August, Evelyn had run the flock through 2 complete rotations across all 4 sections. She pulled her harvest logs and laid them side by side against the same stretch of the year before, the prior year. Nearly 40% of her spring and summer crop lost to slug damage. This year, the same months, 6%, and most of that was heat stress, not pests. Slug damage barely registered on the page at all. She called the Hazel room that same afternoon. The standing order went back on the books.